lack of psychological safety means that there are people on your staff who do not feel safe enough to give you information that can optimize your decision making. They have information, but they don't want to share it with you because they don't know how you're going to respond if you're going to bite their head off. So we test it. We take Amy Edmondson's questionnaire of psychological safety. I adapt it for professional sports, send it out to the coaches, tell them it's anonymous. They don't believe it's anonymous, just like any other organization. They send it back. He saw really quickly that his coaching staff was not psychologically safe. What does a psychologically safe environment look like? You know how when we go out to the bar, as like some of us, and we go and we're debating and we're who's better, Kobe or Jordan, and then we're like pushing against nobody's right, but everyone feels safe to disagree. There's no hierarchical chain. Like we will call you out if we disagree with you. I said, that's what it looks like.
On today's episode of Limitless Minds, we have a guest who is someone who's coached world champions, elite athletes, and high-performing teams, and is now pouring that experience into shaping the next generation of great leaders. Justin Sua is the founder of Performance Advisory Group, a leadership development agency that works with head coaches, professional sports staffs, and executives to help them lead with clarity, communicate with impact, and perform under pressure. Before launching his agency, Justin spent years in the trenches of elite sport, serving as the head of mental performance for the Tampa Bay Rays and working with the Cleveland Browns, Boston Red Sox, U.S. Army, and Olympic athletes. In this conversation, we explore his evolution from mindset coach to leadership advisor and what truly sets elite leaders apart and what today's high performers, whether in sport or business or life, need most. Enjoy. All right. On today's episode of Limitless Minds, we have Justin Sua. He's kind of been like he's kind of been like a friend from afar. You know, he's been in this space, and it kind of as he's kind of developed a really just a great respectable name in the mindset space. He's made some evolutions to that. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But with our work that we did with our late co-founder Trevor Moawad, we've always kept an eye on some of the best and the brightest in the space of like peak performance and mindset and leadership development and kind of character development, particularly as former athletes, paying attention to what's going on with some of the greatest teams in sports, both from a individual contributor perspective, but also leadership. And so we're just really excited to have Justin on. Justin, what's up, brother?
Hey, what's up? So grateful for this opportunity. Well, yeah, like you said, I've been watching, admiring you guys and Limitless Minds from a distance, and glad to finally be able to chop it up a little bit.
Yeah, no doubt, man. No doubt. I appreciate it. Where so tell people where you're at and and a little bit of your journey from a performance perspective. What pulled you into the mental game? We'll talk a little bit about some of the work that you did in the mental the mental conditioning space. Talk a little bit about that history and that evolution, if you will.
Yeah, I had no intentions to being here. I always wanted to be a high school sports broadcaster. I actually got my degree, my bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism. I wanted to be the next Stuart Scott. And for those who remember Stuart Scott,
boom shakalaka.
Yeah, exactly, boom shakalaka. Who was the other side of the pillow? I wanted to be the next. He was my hero growing up. And first interview I did in my internship, I had a microphone in front of Kobe Bryant. And it was, I'm from LA. Kobe's my guy. After that interview, I realized I don't want to do this, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I ended up going into teaching. I was a high school teacher, loved it, wanted to do it for the rest of my life, and went to apply to get a graduate degree in higher education. I didn't have the good grades. I didn't do well on the tests, and I kept getting declined. And then there's this master's degree called the psychosocial aspect of sport at the University of Utah. Had no clue what that was. And I called the dean up. I'm like, what is this? And they're like, oh, it's the psychology of optimizing human performance. And then I paused a little bit. And I said, what does that even mean? And she goes, oh, it's like sports psychology. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Sign me up. And she looks at my transcript and she's like, yeah, there's no way you can get into this department. So I begged, I pleaded, and I started, they let me in, and I was on academic probation right out the gate. And, the rest is history.
What a great way to start.
That was back in 2008.
That's where were you teaching? Where did you first teach at?
So I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, but I was teaching at a school in Provo, Utah. I went to BYU, and me and my wife, she's from Utah, and we ended up settling there for a little bit, and then bounced a little bit, like way over a decade ago now.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
You
Yeah,
and
that's
you played baseball at BYU,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I played baseball. I played baseball at BYU. Recruited as a third baseman out of LA, and then I could have UCLA, Cal State
Mhm,
Fullerton, more baseball
mhm,
schools, but opted to go to
mhm.
BYU. That's where my dad went, and it was
Okay.
always my goal to beat his home run records, and just so I can flex on pops a little bit.
Yeah, that's right.
And
That's
right
right.
when I
yeah,
got to
man. Got to,
BYU,
man.
yeah, I got to, yeah, exactly. So right when I got to BYU, the head coach is like, "Yeah, you're not hitting anymore. We're gonna have you pitch." And
Yeah,
so I told my dad, I was like, "Dad, your records are safe. I'm not going to hit, but the reality is, I probably wasn't good enough to hit."
I got you.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I feel you, man.
that's
That's good,
funny.
dude. So,
So,
you spent some
uh,
time at IMG Academy,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And for those that I think many know, but some don't, Trevor Moai, was a mainstay down at IMG Academy for a number of years. Did you cross over with Trevor down there
No,
at
we
all?
did not cross
Okay.
paths. Yeah, as he was
Okay.
going out, I was coming in.
Got it. I got it. Got it. And then of course you spent some time in Major League Baseball,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
The Tampa Bay Rays, I
Yes.
think Red Sox, and then maybe even NFL, the
Yeah, I
Browns
was with the
potentially,
Browns for
right?
4 years.
Yeah.
I was with WWE for 3 years. I was with the Red Sox for 5, the Rays for 5, and so just kind of a eclectic little journey, just collecting experiences along the way.
I love it, man. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
when you just stepping back a second, you mentioned your wife. Tell us a little bit about your family too.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. So my wife and I have been
Yeah.
married for 21 years. We have 3 kids, a 17-year-old son who my wife is an athlete, and so she loved
Okay.
it. I mean, that's one thing that kind of attracted us to each other. And none of our kids are into sports. So my son is a 19, living in Los Angeles. He's a music producer and has produced for Drake and Bad Bunny, and has a couple of Billboard music awards. And then my oldest daughter Maya,
Mm.
she loves school, and she's right now as we speak getting ready, can't wait to go and get her education, and just loves reading and learning. And my youngest daughter is an actor. She co-starred with Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart and Ryan in Hobbs and Shaw spinoff. It's called Hobbs and Shaw, Fast and Furious spinoff rather. She has her own TV show
Okay.
on the Disney Channel, and now it's and so yeah, we're in there now. They're producing
I
a
love that.
movie, and so we're just all over the place here in the Sua home.
That's awesome, man. I heard about that. There was rumors that your daughter, wherever the rock goes, your daughter goes, which is kind of cool. And that's what a fascinating, yeah, and an eclectic, group of kids and family that you have. That's pretty awesome that they're all into different stuff. Did it surprise you
Yeah.
that none of them wanted to do sports?
It did actually, because a lot of times the environment influences behavior and their like and what they enjoy. And it seems like in this case, what I learned is it might not always be in the scope of like the domain specific necessarily, but being around great athletes and coming home and talking
Mm,
about it. My kids have been
mhm.
at the World Series. They've been on NFL sidelines. They've interacted with NFL athletes and NBA athletes and major league. They're friends. They just check in with each other. And being around that kind of personality, my kids' taste for greatness and desire to be great in their own domain, I can tell it's spilled over to them, and it's been fun watching them not ask the
It's
question, what
cool,
do I want
man.
to be when I grow up, but rather, what do I want to be right now? And it's been neat to water their ambitions in that
Wow.
way.
I love that you said water
So
their
cool.
ambitions. That's kind of dope. I mean,
Water.
yeah, well, but we talk, and we end up always talking about kids in on this podcast. It seems like, obviously we're fathers, and we talk about mindset, we talk about leadership, and then this kind of, melting pot of like how, as fathers, like how does that show up for, the people that we're raising, and how does it show up for you? I mean, show up for you, because you have to kind of make these choices, like when am I dad, and when am I, like, mindset coach,
Right.
for them, and like how do those two things like overlap, and or should they play in the same sandbox? What's your take on that?
You're exactly right. And I think I get the question all the time. Do your kids know the 6 P's of confidence? Do your kids know the frameworks of motivation? I'm like, no, they have no idea the names of those
Right.
things. However, they're
Yeah.
constant conversations that we talk about the principles of those things in real life as a father, a child, parents, and their kids. I think what really resonated, opened my eyes, was I came home one day, and my wife was up, and I'm in the kitchen. I'm eating dinner that my wife prepared for me. I'd be gone all day. I've been gone for a long time. And we're catching up and talking, and my eyes catch a family picture, a drawing on the refrigerator. And I'm staring at it. And I asked her, I was like, what's the story behind that? And she
Mhm.
goes, have your son tell you. Now,
Mhm.
mind you, my son is 5 years old in kindergarten at the time. And so he wakes up the next day and I couldn't wait to ask him. We're eating breakfast. I'm like, son, tell me about this picture. And he goes, oh, yeah, that's our family. They told us to draw our families. And I said, do you know how many are in our family? He goes, yeah, 5. I said, son, there's only 4 people in the picture. And I said, where's daddy? And he says, not trying to be mean, not trying to take a jab at dad, but he said words that I'll never forget. He said, daddy's too busy to be in my pictures. And that
Dang.
was something that just really struck a chord with me. And it really
Yeah.
helped me realize that I need to win at home. And when I am home,
Mm.
I really need to be fully home and pour into their lives and ask them questions and really spend time with them. Because as you know, it's hard. Like we talk about balance. A lot of people do rather. There's no balance with you greatness. And that's
Yeah.
something that I toggle with and struggle with all the time. I want to be as great as I possibly can in my domain, especially working with greats. That there is
Mhm.
no balance a lot of times. However,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get better at the word blending my family and work. And so which led me to start the performance advisory group, to walk
Yeah.
away 2 years ago and say, I'm not going to be employed by a team anymore. I just want to go and focus on coaches. And I want to eat what I kill, so to speak, and be my own
Yeah.
Yeah.
entrepreneur and have my own insurance. And if we want a roof over our heads and food on the table, it's not that every 2 week, hey, can I have a raise, or hey, can we have some money? It's daddy's got to go and work. And
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
constraints have caused me to be more creative and more intentional and
That's cool.
deliberate. And it's allowed me to really be present in every aspect of my life. Very difficult, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love where we're at right now.
Well, let's talk about PAG, Performance Advisory Group, right? I'm really curious, what's inspired that. You already kind of touched on a little bit of that opportunity and that shift, but like what led you kind of shift from like, peak performance and mindset coaching, mental conditioning coaching to leadership development
Yeah.
at Performance Advisory Group. Tell us a little bit about that.
There was a lot that was involved, and as Steve Jobs says, a lot of times you're able to you can only connect the dots looking back. I had
Yeah.
no intention on this
Mm.
happen. So it was kind of a collection, an aggregate of a lot of different experiences and observations. So one I can remember, I'm on the field with the general manager of an NFL football team many years ago. I think it was 2018.
Hmm.
And he says, we are pouring millions and millions of dollars into player development. He goes, there's going to be a day where we pour the same, a large portion into coach and staff development. And
Hmm.
this was a long time ago. And this was before the emergence of tech and algorithms and models and R&D teams. And I asked him, what do you mean by that? He goes, well, coaches, a lot of times they get their jobs because either somebody, or they're great team guys in a locker room or whatever. And now they have a coaching job, but they've never been taught. They don't have a class on strategy. They've never been taught how to be a CEO. They've never been taught
Mm.
on decision making and applied behavioral economics. They're just going by what they learned. And there are some growth mindset coaches out there who would love to learn how to get better. And he said,
Hmm.
I think that's going to be the future. I always kept that in the back of my mind, and I
Hmm.
just continued to go about my work. Now, another thing started happening during my process. I I got away from the word mental performance for this reason. The word mental could be very tricky for people. I
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
noticed as myself, when I would be with players, oh, they're talking to the mental guy. Something must be wrong. I would
Hmm.
enter a meeting to learn, oh, what's the mental guy doing in here? Why is a mental person here? And there was always just kind of a in some places a negative label to it, where there shouldn't be. There should Those who know what I do, they know what I do, and it's great. I found myself having to explain what I do and what I don't do. Part two about that is players and coaches don't know the difference between mental health, mental performance, mental wellness, and it was just starting to create confusion. And if I want to be a good practitioner, one of my tried and true principles is clarity. We want to be clear, and if there's confusion on what I do and what I don't do, then I'm doing a
Yeah.
disservice to the players and the coaches.
Yeah.
Now, the third part about that as well is I've learned that some of the best mental performance coaches are coaches themselves. It's a strength and conditioning coach. It's a quarterbacks coach. It's a pitching coach. A lot of times it's those coaches. Players would rather go talk about confidence and mental toughness and focus with the coaches and not this person who has the alphabet behind their name, who got a master's degree or PhD in sports psychology from Harvard. They don't care. A lot of times players and coaches don't care about that. They want someone who's been there, done that. And so I'm just collecting these data points, all of
Yeah.
these data points. And so the first thing we did with the Rays is we changed the title from mental performance coach to process coach. Because at the end of the
Oh,
day, that's what we're doing. We're helping people develop a process around confidence. What's your process around decision making? What's your process around routines or solving these problems? And that little name change gained a lot of
Mm,
traction. Coaches are like, "Oh, this is great," because we want to show respect to all the people that are out there who are also teaching confidence and mindset and stress management, who might not have a degree in sports psychology. And so we just wanted to open up the aperture and say, hey, mindset coaching it's a group effort. Parents could teach it, coaches could teach it, and so that's what we wanted to open. So then what ended up happening is I start in the off season, I started getting phone calls from coaching staffs in other sports. And they said, hey, Justin, can you come do a workshop not on mental skills, but on tools of connection, on communicating? They said they heard word that I'm helping coaches with being better storytellers, with communicating more
mm,
effectively, with asking better questions, things that have nothing to do with sports psychology. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it because what we were tapping into was my teaching background. I spent 5 years teaching a curriculum and education pedagogy and teaching teachers how to teach, and now it's starting to go into a domain that separated me. And I ended up loving it. Then we started getting into leadership. And then while I was there, head coaches would say, hey, can we chat? I don't have anyone in the building I can share these ideas with. It's a lonely job. And I don't, sometimes if I express frustrations in the building, then people will start thinking I'm losing confidence. If I start, I tell play coaches, hey, my door is open, but nobody's coming in to talk to me because I'm the head coach. And so I just need someone to just kind of bounce my ideas off and think out loud with, to be able to stress test some of these ideas and have somebody who is not under me necessarily.
mm.
I'm not I'm not in the power dynamic. These head coaches and
Yeah.
coaches are not my boss. And so I can ask questions that no one in the building is asking. I could push where no one else in the building is pushing because my relationship with the coach, it doesn't affect my livelihood. And so all this was on accident. I didn't do this on purpose. It just happened to be the feedback that I'm getting from these coaches. Started 2 years ago, and it's we've been doing it ever since.
So
I
cool.
love that, dude.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I really like that. And it's interesting too, because you're right, there is a stigma with the whole word mental and and that aspect. And when you talk about leadership and mental performance, there's so much overlap in terms of what you're teaching, but rebranding it, redefining it, and doing it with some of the best teams, in the world, and some at the in with leaders that are at such a high level is really fascinating. What are some of the things that you see when you're working with these leaders as like some common blind spots that they have?
Yeah, no, I that's a really good question. Here's one thing I love about these men and women that I'm working with is they are, like you said, the best in the world. Some NFL staffs, Major League Baseball staffs, NBA staffs, women's basketball, women's golf, individual sport. It's so fascinating, and I don't publicize who I'm working with, but it's so fascinating. But some common obstacles that they run into is learning how to learning how to notice the dog that's not barking is one that has been we've really been talking about. Now, let me explain like what that mental
Okay.
model entails. So there's a book that was written, Sherlock Holmes. So Sherlock Holmes, he has the many stories where he's solving these problems, but there's one that really resonates with me where he solved this problem of a horse that was a missing horse, And the way he solved the problem as he was investigating is because he noticed that there was a dog that didn't bark. Now, what that means is the night of the intruder entering, the guard dog didn't bark. And the reason the guard dog didn't bark was because the intruder was a familiar face. And it took Sherlock Holmes recognizing and noticing, that guard dog didn't bark. That little clue helped him solve the entire problem. And I think a lot of times the best coaches, especially in professional sport, which is primarily where we're at right now, is there's a lot going on. But the best coaches are learning how to pause to be able to be still, to notice the dog that's not barking, to notice that player who usually speaks up, who's not speaking up, who notices that that staff meeting where it's usually lively and interactive is not so lively and interactive anymore. That assistant coach who comes in with a lot of energy, who'd go from office to office and dap people up and say hi, he's not doing that anymore. And so these coaches are now trying to learn to notice the dog that doesn't bark, not just what's happening, but what's not happening. I have so many of these things, that these subtle little things, but that I would never have known. I can't read it in a book. I can't listen to it on a podcast. You learn it being in the office, being at OTAs, being at NBA training camp, being at the field for in the coach's office and letting him or her share with you what's happening. That's something that a lot of these coaches are trying to get better at doing. Another thing that I find is fascinating that they're learning how to do is just embrace conflict. Literally embrace it. And a lot of times we think, instead of going and asking players what's wrong, or telling players what's wrong, but asking them, getting better at asking effective questions, needle moving questions. There is a research study. I mean, there's a theory called it's called penetration theory in social psychology, and essentially, I'm gonna simplify it. There are 4 layers, but to getting to know a player, but we're gonna break it down to 3. So there's the surface layer, where essentially how tall the player is, weight, where the player's from, information that everybody knows. And then there's the next layer of knowing a player, which is you know him or her well enough to where you can somewhat predict how they're going to behave when they walk into the building. Again, there's deviations but you kind of can predict their personality. But then the core layer is when a player is able to share information with you that you literally can't get from anywhere else. This is when they share their fears with you. They share their insecurities with you. They share their goals, their dreams. Building those kind of relationships with players where they'll share information, where they trust you enough to share that information. That's something coaches are really trying to learn. The ones that I've been seeing at this high level, because with again, emergence of tech and a lot of competition and players being able to bounce from place to place, especially in college, strength of relationships is not starting, but it's a competitive advantage now.
That's interesting, dude. I mean, the whole thing about noticing the dog that doesn't bark is like a really dope metaphor. And like, because like that's something I hadn't really heard before, DJ. I mean, like I think but like I even, as soon as you start talking about stuff like that, I even think about our business, and in our people, and our strategies, and our the different our business has evolved, how we approach it, our process has evolved, and how we communicate to our team. The team's gotten big, then small, then big, and small again. It's like, it's just interesting because I'm sure there's been various dogs that aren't barking that maybe we've missed, and then some that we've been able to capture. And I think that resonates with me. Hey, do you do anything, Justin, with corporate, like in the corporate space, or is it focused on athletics right now?
Right now, the focus athletics. I will be asked to go speak to corporate places or do a couple of consulting conversations with some. I have a couple of front office members and presidents of some professional sports teams that I'm doing one-on-one executive coach work, leadership development work with, but primarily it is within the sports world.
Well, and the reason why I'm asking, because Limitless, we do mostly corporate, right? And there's this really interesting, and maybe for some obvious correlation and parallel, for some maybe not as obvious, but from a leadership perspective, a leadership performance perspective, one of the things that we see a lot, and we've seen this kind of really since COVID. I think it's probably existed forever, but I think since COVID has kind of come to the top. And DJ, you know this well, like the leaders really struggling with balancing empathy with a drive for results. balancing empathy with a drive for results. And it kind of, to me, I just thought about this because it points to that kind of that third like little tier that you mentioned, right? About trying to really kind of build these relationships so that way you're able to kind of tap into maybe the dogs that aren't barking for that individual, right? Getting them to kind of level up in ways that maybe you can kind of peel back the onion. And that balance of empathy and drive for results is kind of that key to opening that oftentimes. Do you see that in the athletics space as well?
Yeah, I'm
Does that
actually,
resonate with you?
yes, I would actually love to ask you too a question.
Yeah.
How do you all do it? What is the tie between empathy and results for Limitless Minds as you work with these great corporations and leaders yourself?
Well,
Yeah.
DJ, you probably gonna have a really dope answer for this. I might start with just something that we do internally for our team. And then DJ, maybe, I think you probably have some really good ways we approach it from a like a service and value add perspective. But like, and this is really started by DJ. Like, we have a gratitude channel in our we have our kind of our Slack, our kind of a Google, our chat, room that we communicate with a lot. And of course, our company's all virtual. We started this company virtual. COVID hits, we remain virtual, so you don't get the chance to see people a lot, right? And this gratitude channel has kind of been an interesting tool, because every day typically people will throw something in there they're grateful for, and some people do it every day, some people do it every other day, once a week, whatever it might be. But when something strikes them that they're grateful for, they put it in, and it can be something really small, super micro, or something macro. And what's interesting is like brick by brick, day by day, week by week, you start to kind of really understand like what's important to people, right? What's maybe their driver. It might not be the money, it might be something with family, it might be their fitness and health, it might be whatever it might be. You start to kind of get a nice picture of what's important to them, what's bringing them joy, because that's what they're expressing in the gratitude channel. And so when shit hits the fan, or when there's a problem, or there's a challenge, or there's a fierce conversation that needs to be had, you're able to kind of tap into some of those things that are like the most important things to these individuals, right? And you're kind of starting to build this recognition of what they value. So I think for us, it kind of allows us, when we're trying to kind of balance empathy and drive for results, it allows us to focus on empathy, because we know we have a little view into like what they're striving for, right? So that's something we do internally, that I think helps us. You know what I mean? It's a constant work, but I think that helps us quite a bit.
I like that.
Internally.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and the other thing I would say, and it ties into this, is like when you do things like that, whether it's gratitude, or just getting an understanding for the people on your team or your customers, it builds a sense of like trust. You're going deeper with them. It helps you to be able to be transformational, not transactional. We talk a lot about that with our business, and so you think about empathy versus drive for results. Empathy, in order to be empathetic, I have to understand. I have to ask questions. I got to be Sherlock Holmes, right? I have to ask good questions to get a deeper understanding. That process is very transformational. Results are somewhat transactional, right? Now they can come as a result of, you can get great results as a result of, transforming your team, transforming the folks around you. But like when you look at those two buckets, how much time are you spending in transformation versus how much time are you spending in transactions? And that for me has been something as a leader that when I'm able to use that as my quick litmus test, I tend to be much more intentional around asking great questions of my team, building trust with my team, and which allows me to be empathetic, right? Because I'm understanding them better. And then ultimately, when I do that first, the results come. So
I like that.
that's
I really like that. I do have comments on what that looks like at the pro head coach level, and I do see a lot of correlations. A question I have for you two before I go is, can you have too much empathy, or what's the shadow side of empathy? What is
That's a great question.
Yeah. I think you can, I think it's a fine line. I'll give you one example of what I mean by that. As an organization, you want people to love working at your company, right? Or in their role, you want them to love it, right? You want them to, and as a founders in particular, like you want them to kind of have this founder mentality, but the reality is they're not founders, right? And they have their own incentive comp package or structure. They have their salaries, whatever it is that you're incentivizing them for. They have their role and their responsibilities. Cool. And you want them to have this founder mentality. And as such, especially as a small organization, it can become very dangerous when you start to address the team as family.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Even though like
Mm-hmm.
I really want my team to feel like family, I want them to
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
like, hey, we love each other. We're going to look out for each other. We got each other's backs. All of that's real. Like we want people to feel like family. But I think using the terminology family it can be dangerous because it's an empathetic word, right? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, hey,
Right.
like I'm gonna treat you as family is I'm gonna treat you a certain way. I'm gonna, treat you equal and all that all these different things. But I think the danger with family when it comes to business is that, hey, like, the reality is that of my family, like it's unconditional love, with my family, for me, my brother, my sister, my mom, etc. Like it's unconditional love,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can do no wrong from the standpoint, I'm never leaving your side,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But in business, like there may come a time where you outgrow us, we outgrow you, whatever it might be, right? The job's not getting done, whatever it might be. And so we might have to help you find excellence elsewhere, right?
Mm.
At some point, at some time, right? And so I think that, trying to shift that language from family to team, I think is really critical. And I think that's just one example of like how empathy may go too far from an
Mm.
organization perspective. And you have to be careful because that is a fine line between, that drive for results and that empathy that exists in that terminology of
Yeah.
family versus team. So that's something that I've
No,
seen
I
at
like
least.
that. I like that. I like that a lot. No, that's awesome. And thinking about this as you two are talking, there are a lot of similarities in pro sports, as you both know. I'm not gonna act like you two are very. You're no strangers to pro sports at the highest level, and so I know I know my audience, and you know what this is like. But and I say but or and rather, what's also interesting to understand as people who might not realize is like pro sports is a zero sum game. There is a winner and there is a loser, and some coaches have and players have a long time horizon, a long runway, and some have a very short runway. And
Mhm.
some teams have. And what's interesting about that is when you win, there's only one winner at the end of the season, and so it adds this these variables, these factors, these time components, these pressure components. I mean, these are elite athletes where they fail on the grand stage. The personalities that this system brings, like you have a lot of alpha type, like multi-millionaire veteran personalities where again it's different, but in the sense of similarities like you're describing, the relationship between empathy and being results driven, or getting results. I think there is a lot of similarities in that. It reminds
Mhm.
me of so a question that I love to ask is, okay, let's get on the same definition. What does
Mm.
empathy mean to everybody? So if I'm a leader listening to this episode and you're thinking, oh, I want to empathy is one of my values, or I want to display empathy in my leadership. So I would like you as a leader to grab a sticky note, and you write down, what is your definition of empathy? And then you ask everybody on your team to grab a sticky note, and you have everybody else write their definition of empathy. If if these definitions are not the same, step number one, everybody needs to get on the same page on what is our culture's definition of empathy. What does it look
That's good.
like? What does it not look like, so that we're all on the same page, because it could be different things for different people. And I'm a huge fan of just clarity on definitions. What is
Yeah.
our working definition as an organization?
That's right.
And another thing about empathy is, I think about psychological safety. I think in the corporate world, people know Amy Edmondson's work. You hear psychological safety. We've read her articles and her studies, which are some of my favorite. I love it. I went to a coach once, and I was just making observations. And I went up to this head coach and I said, "You don't have a psychologically safe or a coaching staff. I get paid to just deliver news, just observations." And he
Mhm.
goes, "Why the blank would I want that?" And I just remember just like laughing. He was like, he's like, "That sounds like the softest word, a psychological safety. Like, what are we doing? We're trying to win championships. We're not this kumbaya psychologically safe. I'm not, I don't want psychological safety." But even Amy Edmondson says that, who is the author of this study, or this
Mhm.
Mm,
construct. She says
Mhm.
that psychological safety isn't the goal; it's a vehicle in order to achieve your goals. And so I remember telling this head coach, this is how I pitched it. I said, you are the ultimate decision maker. You are the number one decision maker on the field. He goes, yes, I am. And I said, lack of psychological safety means that there are people on your staff who do not feel safe enough to give you information that can optimize your decision making. They have information, but they don't want to share it with you because they don't know how you're going to respond if you're going to bite their head off. And he goes, are you serious? He goes, that's what you think? I said, that's exactly what I think. He goes, I completely disagree with you. There is no way, he goes, anyone could share anything with me. And I said, can I test it? And he goes, yeah, go ahead. So we test it. We take Amy Edmondson's questionnaire of psychological safety. I adapt it for professional sports, send it out to the coaches, tell them it's anonymous. They don't believe it's anonymous, just like any other organization. They send it back,
Right.
and I go over with the head coach, and he saw really quickly that his coaching staff was not psychologically safe. And he goes, well, what does this look like? What does a psychologically safe environment look like? I said, you know how when we go out to the bar, as like some of us, and we go and we're debating and we're who's better, Kobe or Jordan, and we're debating football, we're debating basketball teams and baseball teams, and we're like pushing against nobody's right, but everyone feels safe to disagree. There's no hierarchical chain. Like we will call you out if we disagree with you. I said, that's what it looks like. Where at the end, the best information comes to the top. And he goes, and I said, you get that in the bar with the coach, but you don't get that in the building. And he said, we need to make some changes. And so what we're talking about here is empathy. We're talking about, I care about you so much. I want to hear your opinion. Now, mind you, there are other instances where a coach is like, I do not care about that guy or girl's opinion. And what do I do in that sense? But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, another thing, just kind of on this topic of empathy, there's an empathy researcher. He says sometimes as leaders, we give empathy blockers. So we have one thing, you can look at how do we increase empathy. That's great. But another way is to identify what are empathy blockers. And I want to give him Soroka, I think is his name, his last name. But he says there are three things. Number one is being the fix-it leader. I just fix everything. They come to me with their problems or they say their problems. Let me fix it for you. I tend to do that as a husband to my wife way too more than I should. So we just want to fix it. Hey, you came to me with your problem. I'll fix it. Boom. We got this easy. Number two is to be able to the second way to block empathy is to just say, well, listen to what I'm going through. Oh, hey, I'm going through something even worse than you. I'm the leader of this whole thing. You think it's bad for you. Listen to my problems. And then number three is just completely dismissing it. Just essentially saying, it's not that big a deal. Hey, wait, what? Like you have coworkers not working well with you? Doesn't matter. So those are three empathy blockers. And one way to increase empathy might be to just avoid those empathy blockers.
Yeah, that's really good. Really, really good. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about, as you're talking, we talk about empathy, we talk about a drive for results, right? But like in between there, once you're empathetic and you understand your team, it's like now it comes to the process, the next right step, the certain standards that you've set for your team. What have you seen the great teams, the great individual leaders do to set great standards and really lead well when it comes to the process that will ultimately drive the results?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think wherever you see consistency, a system is in place. And not only does that work for the good behaviors and consistent good behaviors, but the consistently bad behaviors. I think great leaders, great coaches are systems thinkers. They understand systems, and if this happens, that happens. They also understand lagging effects. They're lagging indicators and leading indicators. I don't think we talk about that enough. I never knew anything about that when I was in the sports psychology world. We never talked about lagging leading indicators. We never talked about systems theory, applied behavioral economics. We never learned any of that kind of stuff. And so learning from other industries and other leaders, that kind of opened my eyes to how much leadership, like just what it really entails on how to think. I think some of these coaches, these leaders, number one, they understand systems. They're able to understand this is what we want, and then working backwards, as you talked about, establishing processes and standards and so forth. I think another thing that these great leaders do is they execute the work derived from Eduardo Salas. He is he's a team development specialist, and he is helping NASA construct the team to go to Mars. And one of the things he said, he was on stage and he was speaking to a group of engineers, and they asked him, what's the number one thing advice that you'd give to build an elite team? And the person didn't even get to finish their question, and he gave the answer. It was simple. He goes, debrief. And they're like, what? He goes, debrief. He goes, too many leaders are holding meetings or holding one-on-ones or doing drills or doing an activity, and they are not debriefing. They're driving home at the end of the day without pausing and saying, how did I do today? Did I get the result I wanted to get? After a meeting, to pause and say, hey, what did you get from this meeting? When you have a one-on-one with somebody, to say, hey, how was this one-on-one just now? What is your takeaway from that? People don't do that regularly. And I think the great leaders that I've seen, they're getting really good at collecting data and being able to debrief, even if it's simple, even if it's short.
Yeah.
I was with an NFL team, and they just had practice, right? OTAs, and got done with practice. He grabbed his team and he had a meeting. They went over how practice went, and it was supposed to go an hour long. And then it would kind of folded right into another meeting. He ended it 10 minutes early and he ended it early, and they're like, oh, we're done early. He goes, yeah, I need 10 minutes to go get feedback from Justin, who's here, on how I just did this meeting. It was so inspiring to me. It was so inspiring to
So
me to
cool,
say,
man.
whoa, like here is a leader who cares so much about a coach, who cares so much about not just being a good coach, but being a good leader, that he ended his meeting
Yeah,
10 minutes early and he grabbed out his notebook. He's like, all right, hit me with it. And he just
that's
wanted the
cool.
truth. And we discussed and we talked. And who am I to just say, do this, do this, do that better? I've never been in his job, but we explored and we had what I love to call a generative conversation where the truth bubbled to the top. It wasn't me teaching him teaching me. Hey,
Right.
let's chat together and let's come up with some ideas together. And so,
Really
kind
good.
of going off on a tangent, but they're very intentional. I think the great leaders, they do things by design and not default. They're very intentional about their energy. They're very intentional about what they say, what they don't say. And a lot of these coaches that we're working with, they're learning how to do that, and they're very open. That's what I love about it. They're
It's
so
great.
growth
It's a
minded.
great example.
I think it's this reminds me of something that I've been just kind of like wondering about in my head and trying to like circulate. So, so let's just think about social media for a second. So on social media, the algorithm catches you, right? If
Mhm.
you're in a nutrition kick, you're going to get a whole bunch of things on nutrition or fitness, right? And as a result, you get all this different quote unquote expertise, right, that are giving you all the all the advice from all these different angles that oftentimes compete with each other. So if it's nutrition, let's just say it's intermittent fasting. There'll be you'll start to consume things that are like, man, intermittent fasting is like the way to go, right? And then you'll see, and then all of a sudden your algorithm's showing you that intermittent fasting is maybe not so good, and here are the studies to show that it's bad, but it depends on your body type. And then in the fitness side, it's like, it might be people that are like, hey, proteins so critical, and here's all the reasons why, which by the way I buy into. But then there's somebody else kind of giving you a converse message, and so I think about this in regards to, like, as leaders, and this concept of debriefing, that I feel like leaders might be struggling with, and it's just something that you brought it up. I'm just thinking about now, so it's not fully baked, but I think there's a lot of kind of gurus out there that are getting leaders to, like, not have so many meetings, right? Demythify, right? Like, meet less. Don't have these like meetings that make you feel like you're being active, but don't have, like, action steps behind them. But then also there's this quality, this QT, this quality time as a team, as one-on-one, whatever it might be, to take the time to debrief. And so, like, the point is that I just wonder, are leaders kind of competing in their own minds on, okay, what time should I spend, right? Where do I spend this time? Like, what's really efficient? Is the efficiency in having less meetings, right? Or is the efficiency in taking the time to debrief, to kind of make sure that there's alignment and there's communication at the highest levels? Like, how do you see that? Are you buying what I'm selling here on this?
I love what you're saying. And you actually touched a really sensitive spot for me, in terms of, like, not sensitive in the terms of like, oh, I shy away, but I love this topic, and it is more ancillary. This guru world. And again, I just, this world of, like, Basically, if you have an industry where experts are disagreeing with each other, that tells you how fickle the industry is. And
Mhm.
so in that case, you need to use your best judgment, collect your information, and do what's best for you. What I noticed being 10 years employed by professional sports teams, we would bring gurus in. We would bring, and again, I say that respectfully. Like I'm sometimes a person who comes in to organizations. We bring these experts in, these people who they've never been in the trenches in the foxhole with us, but they give us
Mm-hmm.
their 5 tips of culture, 4 strategies to for communication, which is great. It's wonderful. Then I go to the coach's room when we're sitting there, and the feedback I always hear is they're going to go with that same speech to this people. They didn't talk to us. They don't know us. They don't know our culture. That advice they give is horrible for this situation right here.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it really opened my eyes to be like, whoa, this now that with emergence of we have so much access to books and all these frameworks and cookie cutter, like kind of like, let me give this to the masses. Leaders are starving for not just in case information, but just in time information, the Wi-Fi, what's in it for me? How can it work
Mhm.
for me? So I love that point. Another thing, you remind me of a Philip Tetlock quote. He says, beliefs are hypotheses to be tested, not treasures to be guarded. I am in the business of poking holes in assumptions, including our
Mhm.
own assumptions, to
Mhm.
asking coaches, what is your sacred cow that you believe? Now let's shred this together. Let's
Mhm.
really break it down. Do you still believe this? Or is this something that you used to believe that is actually you're holding on to, but you now are realizing it worked in that context, but it doesn't work in this context. And so
Yeah.
to
Right.
your point, Harry, I'm a big fan of bullets before cannonballs. Essentially, a base that's Jim Collins, like firing
Mhm.
bullets before cannonballs and exploring, examining, running iterations. Let's test it. One thing
Yeah.
you'll always hear me say with leaders, "Hey, let's test it. Oh,
Mhm.
let's cut down on meetings. Let's
Mm.
test it for 2 months. Let's come back and see what does it do to you and what does it
Mhm.
do for you. Instead of just throwing it out, no, I'm not going to do that. Let's test it. Okay,
Yeah.
what are now we
Mm.
enter probabilistic reasoning and affects it third, second, and third order effects. Okay, if you do this, what could happen? Could this solution create more problems? Is the trade-off worth testing it? Okay, let's test it. Let's try it. What are we hypothesizing is going to happen? And then we're going to come back in 2 months after doing it, and we're going to test our hypothesis. Were we right
Yeah.
or were we wrong? It has been the best. It's there's no cookie. I don't have the answer. I have
Right.
no idea how this is going to work, and I'm playing devil's advocate. Like we came to this idea, and I'm trying to poke holes in it. He or she's trying to poke holes in it. And we're like, okay, you know what? After kind of playing worst case scenario, devil's advocate, it's worth testing. And so I think to your point, yes, gather information, gather data. Oh, here's another thing: anti-guru, anti-pedestal. Let's knock
Yeah.
everybody off their pedestal. I don't care. Like, so what we tell coaches about is every time they read a book, ask 2 questions. Under what conditions is this author wrong? And what are they missing? We don't want to read a book and all of a sudden say, wow, this is gospel. No, no. We are complex, adaptive human systems, meaning what works for one person might not work for another person. And what works for me right now might not work for me in another context. What works for me now
Mm.
as a married man with 3 kids did not work when I was single. And
Yeah.
so I can't apply like the same principles of routines and time. And so I'm a huge fan of not being enamored by experts and gurus and athletes and coaches, and just so we can think for ourselves and just be a good decision maker.
It's good. It's really good. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a great knowledge there, and in terms of how to think and be discerning in terms of the information that you're getting. How much time do you spend if you're talking to a leader? Would you say spend poking holes versus coming up with solutions? Like,
Yeah.
what is that? time allotment look like?
So we are in the business of I remember early in my career, I would sell tools, so to speak, mental skills tools.
Mhm.
I'd be selling meditation. I'm selling breathing. I'm selling visualization. I'm selling self-talk
Okay.
tools. And
Mhm.
then I got to a point I'm like, okay, I said that's a commodity. Anyone can do that. Now, then I kind of I feel like I graduated into selling concepts. Hey, I'm going to help you be more confident. I'm going to help you be more focused. I'm going to help you. And then I saw that only went so far. And now we're in the business of solving problems. And now it's like when we sit down with a coach and we have we call them weekly tap ins, and there's a reason behind the language behind that, but our weekly tap-ins, it's like, all right, what's working, what's not, and so a lot of it is problems. And then
Mhm.
as a coach shares the problem, what they're going through, mind you, problems that a lot of them cannot share or are not sharing in-house because for
Mhm.
a myriad of reasons, they want an outside person who understands the industry, who they can bounce ideas off of. And then once we talk, then the question is, I always ask, activating that prefrontal cortex. Okay, so what are your options? What are you going to do about it? Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. Well, if you do that, what are the trade offs? What are the effects of the effects? And so I would say, I hate always using this answer, is it depends. It really does depend on the situation. I've also learned that there's a cadence. This comes from The Hard Thing of Hard Things, Horowitz book. He says there are peacetime CEOs and wartime CEOs. There are peacetime coaches and wartime coaches. And I usually don't, being having so much respect for the military, I usually like to stay away from military analogies because like that is real peacetime, wartime.
Mhm.
But what I mean is like there's off-season coach and there's in-season coach. Off-season
Right.
coach, we are talking vision and connecting and decision making and building relationships. And then that same coach, once the season starts, like, whoa, this is a completely different person. It's
Yeah.
like we are locked in on this week. We are locked
Okay.
in on this match or this game. And so um, we're talking more problems there. When we're in the off season, we're talking more. We're looking back and looking ahead. It's more aspirational, inspirational. That's what I'm seeing as I'm kind of running a thematic analysis on my current conversations. Some are in season,
Yeah.
some are outside of season. It's very funny to see the temperature from both conversations.
I think that's helpful. I think that's really good advice too, because it's like, I think there's a time to poke holes and go, try to figure out and really analyze what's going on, versus execution mode where like now we've measured, 15 times. Now we got to
Yeah,
execute. And I
yeah,
think, the ebbs and flows of that and weighing that is really important. Yeah, I mean that's the thing that we're seeing with the corporate athlete right now is that, and you've touched on a lot of this, is like as we go deeper with that corporate athlete and really figure out what the pain points are, what challenges do they have, what adversities are they, and changes that are going on, pressures that they're dealing with. Once we understand that, then we can truly problem solve, to your point, as opposed to just teaching a concept and you figure out where to use it, or and they have an understanding of the concept but they really don't know how to activate it or apply it. So I think that what you're talking about today, and you've given so many nuggets and quoted so many different authors, I think is exactly what leaders need to hear. It's like
mhm,
understand who you're talking to and the leaders that you're working with, but then also once you've understood that, then what do you feed them? That's where the true value is, and that tailored, customized approach is what's resonating with whether we're leading our teams, we're working with a corporate client, or we mentioned at the early on, even with our kids.
yeah.
You start giving them cookie cutter approach, and it's just like Charlie Brown to them. Wah 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 wah. You know what I mean? It's just so
Exactly.
so that's been really really helpful, Justin. Good nuggets there.
No, I appreciate that.
Justin, man, this has been great, dude. I mean, I think we might have to, have you on a couple more times because I think there's some
Man,
areas we can go deep on some of this stuff, and just mad respect for what you've done in the past, and even just more optimistic and excited about what you're building and doing with
so
Performance
cool.
Advisory Group. I think it's we're cut from the same cloth. We're trying to solve some of the similar problems for similar but different audiences, and I think that as we continue to observe what you're doing, I would love to figure out how we can help you guys and partner in various ways. I think there's a there at some point, but just mad respect, dude. We're really grateful for you taking some time with us, man. This will be hopefully one of a few of these that we do. Yeah, for sure.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. And I'm in on anytime any collaborations with you two. And I would love that opportunity.
Leaders, I think, if I'm a leader, I'm listening to this, one of my takeaways is to, regularly, daily, weekly, pause and ask myself, was today successful? How did I show up? Did the intentions I set, and hopefully you're setting them, did I execute against those? And then organizationally with leaders that maybe you lead, talk about the dog that isn't barking, try to identify those things. Red team, the different problems that you're trying to solve for and things you're implementing. These are just some of the things I think I took away from our conversation, man. So I appreciate it. And for those that are listeners and watchers of Limitless Minds, remember, you don't have to be sick to get better.